Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Psychedelic Vantage. Today, Adam and I are speaking with Doug Drysdale, CEO of Cybin. Cybin recently announced the initiation of Paradigm, their phase 3 program looking at CYB003 in major depressive disorder. The company also recently released very promising phase 2 12-month data looking at CYB003, and I'm excited to speak about both of these news releases. Doug, always great to have you on the channel. How are you doing today?
Hey guys, good to see you again. Thanks for having me back on. Things are great, obviously. Busy week, but things are good.
I can imagine it being a very busy week, definitely. So Doug, tell us a little bit about Paradigm, your phase 3 program. Um, and also, yeah, touch on the phase 2 12-month data you saw with CYB003 in major depressive disorder.
Sure, yeah, of course. I'm happy to do that. So Paradigm is a three-study program, two short-term studies that are placebo-controlled out to 12 weeks. And then those patients from the two studies roll over into a long-term extension where we follow them up for a year after dosing. And this is all based on lots of back and forth with the FDA. And all of this has happened over the course of this year between February when we had our end of phase two meeting, August when we had a type B meeting, and of course we had in the middle of all of that, the MDMA situation and AdCom. And so we've learned from that. The FDA has been quite vocal about what it expects. And so we're happy to go into this program really with their backing and their endorsement. Having breakthrough therapy designation, is it's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword in that
Hmm.
it's a big advantage to us and that the whole review process should be quicker. Um, it also gives us access to FDA for consultation, so we can ask real questions, have real conversations rather than just written backs and forth. But also, it's an obligation. We're obligated to move as quickly as possible and design the most efficient program possible. So that's what we think we have. The two studies are designed to replicate efficacy in the short term. Both studies have primary endpoints at 6 weeks, and the secondary endpoints are at 12 weeks. FDA very clearly wanted us to have a placebo-controlled period up to 12 weeks. But then they want to see after that period of time, what's the redosing schedule? What's the long-term efficacy? What's the long-term safety? And so the Extend study enables us to follow patients for a year after dosing. Anyone in that study that relapses during that time, who responded in the first studies and then relapses, gets a chance to have another cycle of treatment. So that'll give us some idea of retreatment time. And then anyone that didn't respond in the first two studies, which will be a portion of the active groups, and it'll be probably all or most of the placebo groups. They also get a chance to get dosed as well. So that'll give us some interesting pieces of data too. More long-term follow-up information. We'll likely have patients that have their first cycle of dosing, second cycle of dosing, and even a third dose after that, and still don't respond. Right. So there's a whole mix of things that we'll get from this. The study also, the second study, Embrace, is a three-arm study. It contains two active arms, and the goal there is to use that to kind of confound the patient. So these are psychedelic naive patients. They generally probably can't figure out from their first experience whether they've taken a 16 milligram dose or an 8 milligram dose, which is the other one. And so the expectancy bias cancels itself out. So that's the FDA's way, or one of the ways, one of the things we've designed into the study to help with that. But quite honestly, once you start looking out many weeks past dosing, weeks and months past dosing, if patients are still responding or remitting, it's clearly not expectancy bias. We know that. We know that a single dose of regular psilocybin starts to regress back to baseline. The effects start to regress after about 6 weeks or so. So we know two doses are better than that. We also know with placebo in this phase two study, we get a great initial placebo response, which you see in every depression study. But by 3 weeks, that placebo effect wears away as well because it was only a single dose. So we're not going to have placebo effects over the long term either way because of the dosing protocol. But we are going to get a chance to see in a larger scale just how patients are doing over time. And so to come back to the phase two program, very exciting this week to release data, which I think validates the entire program, honestly. You know, I think we've all known for a long time that these psychedelic compounds have the potential to be effective. Some, and some more than others. It just depends often on delivery and formulation and many other things. We know that they can have large effects in a wide number of people, so the majority of folks. But the big question for commercialization is, are the effects durable? Because there is just isn't the infrastructure for patients to come back and do this on a very frequent basis.
Mhm.
We're seeing that with esketamine, with Spravato, where patients are coming back every 2 weeks, so 26 times a year, which means that those clinics start to run out of space because they can't add in new patients. So it's all the space is taken up by existing patients. So in our phase two 12-month readout, we saw more than 70% of patients in remission 12 months later after just 2 doses. And when you go look in the data as well in the 60 milligram group, the 2 patients that weren't in remission but were responding also had scores of just 11, which is 1 point off of remission. So basically, we had 100% response and essentially 100% remission in this small group. But we also saw 60% response and 50% remission in the 12 milligram group as well. So in both those strengths were effective at a year, but clearly the 16 milligram is starting to separate and look a little better than 12 milligram over time. So really thrilled with the data. I have to say the outcomes at 12 months are even better than I expected. Just what we hoped though, and I think this is tremendous news for patients, of course.
Yeah, that data was, I mean, extremely promising. I believe in the 16 milligram group, baseline MADRS score was at 32 average. You were looking at moderate to severe depression patients, and to see minus 23 points on the MADRS scale at the 12-month mark is, extremely eye-opening. Even though a smaller study, the durability is it's very exciting to see. Um, when I look at the data, I also think about, I guess, the STAR-D study, looking at different response and remission rates at first line treatment, second line treatment, third line treatment. I believe in the first line treatment, patients with depression, when they take an SSRI or SNRI, it's a 30% remission. Once you get to the second level, 25%, I believe, and then third, it's around 15% from memory. Do you, I guess, in the real world, if CYB003 does get approval, what line of treatment do you see it being used in?
Well, what line of treatment it will be used in versus what line of treatment should it be used in will be quite different.
Mm,
The
hmm
decision won't necessarily all be driven around the data. It'll be in part driven by cost, and also that these are new treatments still, and we're learning about them. So in reality, when we talk to payers, even though they know that SSRIs only work for about a third of patients, and then when you start switching, as you say, Jake, and adding in adjunctive treatments, the efficacy just diminishes. They'll still go to SSRIs as the first option and probably more than one, because they're well known, they know what the safety profile is, and they're cheap, they're generic. And then the next step will likely be an adjunctive treatment, maybe Rexulti or Vraylar or one of these adjunctive antipsychotics. Again, well known and relatively inexpensive. But at that point, the docs start to run out of options. What is next? There's not a lot really that is attractive that's next. Is ECT, of course, which is who wants to go there if they don't have to. Um, Esketamine, which is shown to be pretty effective, but very short term. The effects really only last a week or two. Patients are going back every 2 weeks. So I know one of the challenges people talk about with psychedelics is that patients have to go to the clinic. Well, with us, it looks like with CYB003, maybe as you go to the clinic twice a year. With esketamine, it might be 26 times a year. So but patients aren't doing that for esketamine. So that's a hurdle that maybe we won't have to worry about too much. But from our conversations with payers, I think the logical point for us is after doctors have tried their the well-known SSRIs and adjunctives, and many of those are prescribed in primary care, right? And we're unlikely to be promoting psychedelics in primary care. By the time the patient makes it to the psychiatrist, to the specialist, where we will be educating, it's logical that CYB003 would fall into that third line choice ahead of esketamine. Why ahead of esketamine? It works very fast, works for a long time, and the dosing regimen is way more convenient. I mean, so that's the way that we hope things will play out in phase 3.
And Doug, just to, I guess, go back to the data your company has seen with CYB003. I look around, I guess, more broadly at the neuropsychiatry drug development space. For example, we saw intracellular therapies present some pretty promising phase 3 data, I think, looking at Capillita as an adjunct treatment in major depressive disorder. The data looked really good, but one thing I don't see from these other companies outside of the psychedelic space is, I usually don't see remission rates mentioned anywhere.
Right.
And that's what really gets me excited about the psychedelic medicine space. And I think, as you refer to and many others, that maybe these treatments have the potential to change the course of illness or, disease modifying the potential for that. How do, just people or investors, how should they look at your data compared to other companies, the more traditional pop a pill every day? How do you compare?
Look, I mean, you're right. The Capillita data, if you remove psychedelics from the picture, excuse me, the Capillita data is pretty interesting. 2 phase 3 studies with about 4 to 5 points separation from placebo at the primary endpoint, which is much better than SSRIs, like twice, 3 times as good. So that's pretty exciting if you don't have psychedelics in the picture. Look, I think we're just in an era still where there's still a lot of skepticism. We've been told for decades and decades that psychedelics are bad. And then along comes this data, and the data almost looks too good to be true. When you've been told that these molecules are bad for you, and now suddenly they're extremely good for you if used appropriately, it's hard to get your head around that. And what we get is natural skepticism. So I haven't seen a response this week. No, I'll take that back. I've seen lots of positive responses this week to our data, but also lots of immediate negative knee-jerk reactions. Oh, the data set was small. Oh, there wasn't a placebo at 12 months. Of course, there's not a placebo at 12 months. Who gives patients a placebo for 12 months? It's silly comments that all kind of stem from this overall skepticism. And then, of course, in the summer here, we've had execution delays from Compass. We had the regulatory setback with MDMA, and it just fuels the doubt and the skepticism. So we'll break through it. I mean, we'll keep churning out data like this, keep designing really robust and solid studies, and we'll prove them wrong. That's the goal.
Awesome. Got it. Thank you, Doug. Adam.
All right, Doug, you ready? Let's get it. Despite the great results, what are your thoughts on the share price reaction? What do you think it will take for the market to truly appreciate the value and long-term potential for Cybin?
I think it is a long-term situation. And some of the price reaction on sort of Friday, Monday was really sell the news. Okay. Good news is coming. Okay, we'll buy in at this price and then drop it. So people bought in on Friday, sold on Monday. That's what it looked like to me. And that's really, I think, stemmed some of the momentum in the stock. I mean, clearly, we should not have a market cap of $250 million with 2 treatments that have the potential to change the whole mental health treatment landscape. It's ridiculous. People will get there eventually. And we're just gonna have to keep telling the story and keep getting the message out there. It's hard to change people's minds when they have been told for decades that these things are bad. And it doesn't help also that for the last few years, until quite recently, until maybe the last 12 months, we had a whole wide range of psychedelics companies, right, that weren't necessarily as genuine as perhaps they could have been, and it leads to further skepticism. So, but we're just going to keep being heads down. That's all we can do. Like keep executing and keep getting the message out there too. So thanks to you guys, and other outlets that are covering us and hearing this story, because without that, then we don't really have a chance to re-educate and sort of unwind some of the stigma from the last several decades.
Amen. With the recent data release, are you starting to see more interest from large institutional biotech investors?
Yeah, I expect we will. Like, it's early days. The data just came out, a couple of days ago. That we fairly recently uh, consolidated the stock, and the stock is no longer a penny stock. I think we're all relieved about that pressure and frustration. But it also, part of the reason for doing that was that we could open, the story now up to institutions, many of which can't buy stocks below $5. So that's sort of part of the plan. It doesn't happen overnight. Data like we've had this week from the phase 2, and then removing the regulatory hurdles and skepticism by getting FDA clearance to go to phase 3. All this helps. And it will take us time to get the message out there and get out in front of this larger institution. But we're trying to do the right thing structurally to make that possible.
Nice. Can you speak to Cybin's cash runway, and what message do you have for retail investors concerned about potential future dilution events?
So we expect to have cash to get us through to top line data, phase 3 data, and that was what we told people last time we did a financing. But look, we are still in development stage, and we're still a number of years away from approval and commercialization. We will likely need to raise more cash at some point. And I think if you invest in biotech, you know that. Our goal, though, is to keep creating value so that we're not going backwards and keep having to raise at lower prices. But we are a bit at the kind of mercy of the markets. As you just pointed out, look, the stock didn't react this week as we would have liked it to have react. But that's not really out of our hands. We have to just keep telling the story. And look, if anyone out there, any shareholder thinks that we can do a different job of telling the story, I'm all ears. Come and talk to me.
Got you. And for me, lastly, what is your outlook for the sector over the next 12 months in terms of the availability of capital, potential for M&A activity heating up, and key upcoming milestones?
Yeah, look, there's definitely capital available for sure. I don't think there's any question around that. And the few companies that are left, the public trading companies that are left, are all entering or in robust stages of development. All right, and they're all credible as well. So I think that bodes well. We'll see phase 3 readouts coming from Compass. We'll see. MindMed continue to execute as they move into phase 3. Atai's got a whole bunch of earlier stage catalysts coming up, but still making progress. And I think that's good. The sector has changed. The sector is very different, these 4 or 5 companies, than it was even a year ago, and definitely more different than it was 3 years ago. It's been a long day. So I think there's a lot more credibility there, and there's capital there with data and with catalysts.
I got you. Go for it, Jake.
All right, Adam. Yeah, Doug, I was also going to ask, so as of last time we heard of guidance on CYB004, it looks like potential data readout in Q1 of 2025. Would you like to touch a little bit about CYB004?
We're in the middle of the study. We're heads down. We've added a couple of extra sites, actually, and we're dosing patients. It's moving well. No surprises or any adverse events of note to talk about. We're seeing a profile that we expected to see, which is a fast onset of effects, 2-3 minutes. We're seeing about a 90-minute experience, but that's all we really know because the study's blinded and we can't go poking around too much. We want to retain the integrity of the study. So we will know when we know, which we're expecting to be in the first quarter of 2025.
Really excited for that readout. Very excited.
Yeah, me too.
So I guess the final question we have for you here is, looks like RFK Jr. will be heading HHS. There's been a lot of headlines, a lot of eyes on the sector because of some of his comments that have reappeared. I haven't quite made up my mind on, what this new administration would mean for psychedelic drug development companies specifically. But what we do see from RFK Jr. is his son struggled with addiction, had an experience with ayahuasca, and it was a very transformative experience for his son. RFK speaks about the potential of psychedelics to help people with mental health disorders and addiction in a controlled setting. And at the same time, he doesn't seem necessarily, pro pharma. He has actually stated he would not want to see pharma touch psychedelics. What are your overall views of this new administration coming in? Yeah, would love to hear.
Yeah, look, I don't think it's negative. And if anything, maybe it's slightly positive. I'm not going to get too excited until we actually see, these nominations come to bear and we see what they say. But I don't think it's negative. I think it might be slightly positive. I think his enthusiasm for the nation's health in general is great. I'm with him on the food chain. I'm a big clean food advocate and very careful about what I eat, and I think that the food chain needs fixing. So great, let's have him do that. And I'm all for efficiency in drug development as well, and I think that's really what his goal is. I don't think the goal is to come and break down the institutions, because you'll quickly find then you don't get anything approved and nothing done. So the FDA has been built over many decades of incrementally adding data and information. When you go to FDA, you have to always be working in drug development from a position that you only know what you know, and you can't assume anything else, because as soon as you start assuming something about a treatment, you then start to impact patient safety. And the FDA has had decades and decades of drug development experience, and they have eyes on every program, every psychedelic program, but every program, and they know what the pitfalls might be, and that's why they ask us to do so many things. There are 20 or so non-clinical studies that we're doing in the background behind the 3 phase 3 studies. All of that stuff kind of goes on, like in the sort of in the workings behind. But it's because of FDA's knowledge of things that have gone wrong in the past that lead to us doing that. So I don't think his goal is to dismantle, because then you lose that. Then you're going to impact patient safety. I think his goal is to encourage innovation and drive something more than incremental change. I mean, it's frustrating. Now, I've said this myself a few times that, I've been in drug development 35 years, and drug development is kind of incremental. The next drug that's approved is a little bit better than the one before, maybe. And you think about all the capital that goes into that, and it's kind of a waste in some cases. By the time you get to the third, fourth, fifth, sixth Me Too, what's the point? I mean, is there some other way to rechannel that capital and resources and push it towards treatments that can make a real leap forward? And I think we've got that opportunity with psychedelics. And, I'm glad to hear that he's looking at some kind of regulated framework. That's exactly what we've been doing, is collecting the science and the data and the safety and efficacy. Other frameworks that have been proposed aren't working. You saw what happened in Massachusetts. Question 4 got voted down. Why? Because the framework didn't make any sense. The question didn't make a lot of sense. Oregon just continues to go backwards. More and more counties are opting out of that. It's not working because of the way the framework was set up. And the framework's kind of anti-science. It's entirely designed to circumvent FDA and DEA. So those other options that may be considered as a regulatory framework haven't worked. And it's not going to work on a state by state level, which is not what he's advocating for either. So I'm pretty positive. I think there's lots of talk and bluster in this new administration, but when it comes to when the rubber meets the road and things actually have to get done, it's harder than you think to get things done. And I think that his goal is to improve efficiency and not blow up the system.
Doug, thank you so much for sharing your views on this. I've been looking forward to actually asking you that question. Doug, again, thank you so much for coming on the channel. Adam, thank you. To the viewers and listeners, thank you so much for the support and for viewing our channel. I hope you enjoyed this and that you have a wonderful day. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.